The gov.uk One login system has been shown to have vulnerabilities because some of the work was outsourced to Romania, which is a country identified as one of the greatest cyber criminal threats in the world by researchers. So we cannot and must not allow widespread digital ID with full biometric data to go ahead. So please do subscribe to this channel, because if you don't subscribe, you don't like the video, you don't share the video, this doesn't reach as wider audience as I really think that it needs to, not just because it's my channel, but you really need to hear this, and you really need to hear what's in this video, because this is not just me saying it, this is in Parliament, and I'll show you some proof in just a moment. Watch this.
Scandalously insecure nature of the one login procedure. And I'm writing, I should tell the House, I'm writing to the National Audit Office to ask them to investigate it, because apart from the strategic weakness of having a single login, the government's handling of this has been a disaster. As early as 2022, the Information Assurance team responsible for ensuring the security of the system raised concerns that the system was being developed on unsecure workstations by contractors without the security clearance in Romania. When they ran a red team operation to try and see how secure it was, they broke into the system easily, would have been able to put malware in them, and they weren't even detected by the people running the system. So what will happen when this system comes into effect is the entire population's entire data will be open to malevolent actors, foreign nations, ransomware criminals, malevolent hackers, just their own personal.
So let's run through a few of those things. As early as 2022, the Information Assurance team responsible for ensuring the security of this system, the gov.uk One login, which is used for a lot of things and appears to be underpinning the rollout of what will become digital ID, they raised concerns that this system was being developed in part on unsecured workstations, which could, in theory, plant malware, trojans, trackers, and all sorts of other dodgy software, which might compromise the system and ultimately your data, which I'll come back to in a moment, by contractors without the necessary security clearance, many of whom, and some of the work, in Romania, which is a country designated as one of the leading cybersecurity threats. Now, a red team operation is where the good guys act as though they were the bad guys, trying to penetrate the system, trying to hack the system, trying to find vulnerabilities in the system, weaknesses in the system, and to see how secure or insecure the system is. Now, this is not new. This was a few years ago and reported as recent as May this year. They ran a red team operation to see how secure this system was. They found that they could break into this system easily. They would have been able to put malware on there and all sorts of other dodgy software, which is why this is not a sponsored video, but which is why I work with NordVPN, who, by the way, has another product out, Nord Protect. I'll talk more about that in a sponsored video, but I have discounts for those linked below, and I actively push these all the time because your security is absolutely paramount. So in theory, this might flag up in future if there were such malware. It might flag up the government website as having malware on it. Get your head around that. So they ran this red team. They found that there were vulnerabilities. They were being developed on unsecure workstations by contractors in Romania who in theory could have put malware on the system. And during these tests, they weren't even detected by the people running the system. So let's just get our head around that. If this digital ID were rolled out worldwide with biometric ID, fingerprints perhaps, face scans, all these sorts of things linked to your name, your date of birth, your passport, your address, your banks, everything else, all of this information, a single point of login with access to absolutely everything that proves you are you, could in theory be accessed by criminals, even state actors or other malevolent actors who wish to do you harm. Now, how could they possibly do that? Well, if they have access to your login, in theory, they could lock you out of your login, but they could also prove that they are you for one of any number of 1,000 different reasons. Proving loans, proving that you own the property, proving that they own your property, and doing other things with your property, perhaps. Anything that you can possibly think of that you would want to do securely using a so-called secure login, they would be able to do if they compromise the system. But that is not just for you, not just one person. They want to roll this out for every single adult and even those reportedly as young as 13 across the country. Tens upon tens of millions of people with a single point of failure. Now, I've got one or two stories before I come to some news articles about this vulnerability, but here's one or two examples. Now, have you been on a train or a bus or something else when you see somebody with a name tag hanging around their neck because they're on their way to work? That is their name tag. Sometimes they've even got a barcode on there which scans them in and out of the building. That is a single point of failure. Because if they took a photograph of your ID and that is a barcode that gets you into a building or any part of a building, that is a point of failure. What if that is a really secure building ordinarily and they can just take a photograph of it and get themselves in? But more than that, just with your name tag there, with your name and where you work and things like that, they could then find out who you are, where you work. They can map your patterns of travel so they know which train or bus you get on and where you're going to work, what time you're going there. They could even then reverse it and follow you home. And all of these are points of failure. It is a very simple point, but just by having your name tag visible, and it's amazing how many people I see having it hang around their neck, and this is a point of failure. And that is just by having a name tag on show. Now imagine that you left your computer open for anybody to access. And imagine how many things that they could log into if they had access to your biometric ID, for example. Now, speaking of security and access to buildings, I've made myself rather unpopular from time to time because with access to buildings, I've got certain passes to certain buildings. I've even got a court ID that gets me into certain courts without going through security and being searched and so on. Subject to random searches, of course, but as a barrister, I can get into courts with a court ID. But as I said, I've made myself rather unpopular sometimes because when you go through a door and somebody is following you, if you've used your ID or you've used a code to get into the building, somebody following you is obviously not putting in the code. They're obviously not showing their ID. And so if they try to follow you in, what do you do? Do you do the polite thing and hold the door for them, which is a point of failure for security? Or do you turn around and say, I'm sorry, but I can't allow you in unless you've put the code in? Unless, of course, you know who they are and things like that. That's a different story. But if you don't know who they are, what do you do? Have you ever let somebody into the building behind you because it's the polite thing to do? Because that's a point of failure of security. So I've made myself unpopular by saying, I'm really sorry, but I can't let you in. You need to put the code in to enter the building. I've even come across, not with me, but with somebody else, there's one situation exactly like this where they hadn't got their ID with them. And this ended up in a really big argument, even to the point that they called the police because they wouldn't allow them into the building. Now, obviously, that is not something for the police to deal with. You need to show your ID or put in a code to enter the building if you need security access to that building. And again, many of these single points of failure are outrageous. Even on your home router, the login sometimes is admin and password. I think in recent years, they've changed those, but that was also a single point of failure because people could access other people's routers and get onto their network because the passwords were admin and password. It's amazing how many stories like this. Now, the tech experts among you will know exactly what I'm talking about. There are so many little things like this. It is unbelievable. But let's come back to this story because unsecured workstations was at the core of the issue here. Keir Starmer said during an announcement that the system will have security at its core. But risk assessment professionals from the UK Civil Service discovered that contractors in Romania were working on the development of this digital ID on unsecured workstations, according to Telegraph reports. This is how the red team from Cybersecurity, I think I pronounced that correctly, was able to take control of OneLogin's codebase in March, and this was revealed in May. I'll come to that in just a moment. The team reported the situation to the Government Digital Service, GDS, which reacted by disbanding the risk assessment team. The Telegraph suggested that the developer arrangement is usual behaviour as GDS does not have a constant pool of privileged accessed workstations. The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology told the Telegraph that it has a robust device management policy and requires OneLogin team to use GDS-managed devices, monitored by a central security team to detect any malicious activity. Now, case in point, I have Google access on my phone here, but I also have to get a security certificate and get Apple and Google to talk to each other securely so that they can ensure that my device is secure. so that I'm not just allowing access to my emails or my servers to any other device without this level of security. And that's just my email address on my phone. But then we come to company's house verification, because many of you will know, if you've watched my videos, there's a deadline of the 18th of November for new directors to complete this ID verification on a free Verify Your Identity for Company's House service, which has got 3 different options: the app, online security questions, and submission of details through photo ID through the Gov1 login. But then we come on to something really alarming, because apparently when these concerns were raised about the lack of vetting internally, and security experts said that these allegations were serious, apparently some of these claims were ignored and the people who raised these complaints were disciplined, even though some of the work on this £300 million system was outsourced to Romania, which, as I mentioned, was identified as one of the greatest cybercriminal threats in the world. But then when talking about the launch of the Gov UK digital wallet, Peter Kyle, the science minister, said that this system was, quote, underpinned by the security and identity verification measures of the Gov UK 1 login, meaning users can be assured that their documents can only be accessed by the right person, which is demonstrably false if a red team can show that they can compromise the system undetected, and that could potentially compromise every single ID on the entire system. So if it is underpinned by this system, the entire system could in theory be compromised. The Telegraph then says in 1 month alone, more than 10,000 critical security vulnerabilities were detected across the One Login system by Amazon Web Services monitoring tools, according to these documents seen by the Telegraph. An internal audit from 2023 also found that an estimated 39% of the highest level access to the system was made by staff lacking the so-called security level clearance, which is normally required to work on personal data in a critical government project. Clearance is only granted through a thorough investigation of the candidate's criminal record, credit history, and personnel records. If one goes rogue, that can be a disaster, according to Steve Murdoch, the professor of security engineering at University College London. He said a lack of thorough vetting of developers given so-called God mode access to the system was a serious risk. Again, picture this. You've got somebody who apparently is now working on this system, doesn't have the necessary security clearance, they have the qualifications and the expertise, but haven't been vetted properly, so they might have nefarious or malevolent intent, and they have access to this system with so-called God mode, which gives them access to every ID on the system. And again, another side story about somebody going rogue from my somewhat privileged position in the work that I do. Now, obviously, I cannot disclose which company this is, but I can tell you it is a major technology company. That's all I can really say. Now, this company had one of its employees go rogue and hack and do damage to one of the accounts on their system. And they were going back and forth with the user for months to try to figure out what had happened, why it went wrong. It, on the face of it, had been hacked, it had been damaged, and all sorts of things. And they could not figure out why and how this had happened. And that was because it was done internally, because that was one of the least things they expected, certainly at this company. It's one of the most unlikely things that they could have ever predicted to happen, but it happened. I mean, eventually they figured out it was one of their employees went rogue and had internally hacked and compromised that account. And we're talking here about a major tech company, a major global tech company. And that is all that I can say. And what I can tell you is that if that is possible at a company like this, for an internal employee to go rogue and hack and compromise one of their accounts, this is possible for any company anywhere, particularly if it's a third-party contractor company working on the Gov UK 1 login in Romania, where they don't have the necessary security clearance. Now you can see how ridiculous this sounds. And so hence the sort of subheader here. If one goes rogue, that can be a disaster. Concerns raised internally about the outsourcing of work by overseas contractors, including to Romania. Oxford University researchers last year named Romania as among the world's key cybercrime hotspots after producing a cybercrime index. After these issues were raised with the Cabinet Office, the management at GDS were accused of sidelining the staff member who raised the concern and investigated them. So instead of dealing with the problems, it is reported by the Telegraph that instead of dealing with the problems, they sidelined and investigated and, on the face of it, disciplined the member of staff that raised this concern to the Cabinet Office. So they said, this could be bad, this could be a compromise of security, and they were disciplined instead of actually dealing with the issue. And what's really alarming is that I'm sent on a daily basis numerous examples like this one here, where they are rolling these sort of things out all over the place, using facial recognition, artificial intelligence for identity verification, biometric verification for so-called secure document storage, etc. So people verifying who they are, verifying their ID with facial recognition and all the rest of it. Now, as I said, if any one of these has a point of failure, which is exploited, or there's malware on the system or anything else, these can leave you and your whole identity and everything that it accesses open to nefarious actors. And so finally, if you really want to stand against digital ID, you need to collectively pressure your MP to sign Rupert Lowe's letter here and join the growing list of MPs who stand against it, which reads, "Dear Prime Minister, we are writing to register our profound and passionate opposition to your reported plans for compulsory UK-wide digital ID scheme. Such policy would represent an unprecedented level of state control over British citizens. This is a fundamental change to the relationship between the individual and state. It's dangerous, intrusive, and deeply un-British, and I would add a major security risk, as I've outlined in this video. It risks building the foundations of a surveillance state, one that will inevitably expand in scope over time. We urge you to abandon these plans immediately, at the very least committing to a proposal before Parliament for full scrutiny and a free vote. And personally, I think they should come to a referendum. So pressure your MP, legally I might add, to sign Rupert Lowe's letter here and stand against this digital ID. You might get the usual fluff coming back to you about this is why we're doing it and it's a great thing, but I would urge you to politely and legally, I might add, push back and say, no, we don't want this digital ID. So with that, leave me your thoughts and comments. Do share the video, because I suspect some of these videos won't be shared as much as they really need to be. And of course, thank you for watching.